Sage Wanderer here, and welcome to Political Soup. This is a show where we talk about all things American politics. And we are 18 days away from the U.S. presidential election, and things are getting very interesting. Before we get started, I want to thank all of you who support this channel with your thumbs up, your subscriptions, your kind comments, your sharing of the videos, and most importantly, most especially, I thank all of you who support this channel through your kind donations. This channel is not funded by advertisers or promotion. You won't see any commercials on my videos. I don't like being interrupted, and I like the fact that this channel is supported by viewers like you who like what I'm doing here, see the value in it, and choose to support me. So thank you so much. If you would like to become a supporter of the channel, you can find links in the description below to Cash App and PayPal and my post office box. So with 18 days to go, both sides are running the race, and they are very, very busy trying to get their message out. Kamala Harris has finally submitted to a series of interviews. Some of them were okay. Some of them were disastrous for her. Her choice to go on to Fox News and be interviewed by Bret Baier turned out to be quite a debacle for Kamala. She was seen not answering direct questions, and her answer to every question seemed to be, because Donald Trump. One of the most poignant moments is where Bret Baier asked her to defend her record for the last 4 years. How come under her leadership we have an all-time record high of illegal immigrants entering the country? The economy is off the rails and inflation is out of control. And he asked her whether she would do anything differently and asked her to atone or to speak on her record. And her answer was, because Donald Trump is running. And he was like, what? And she goes, come on, Bret, you know what I'm talking about. And he says, no, not really. And he keeps trying to redirect her back to her, to answering his very direct question about her record. And she's seen in pure panic mode. And her answer to everything is, because Donald Trump, because we have to stop Donald Trump. In a recent rally that she chose to attend in Michigan, instead of attending the very traditional Al Smith Catholic Charities dinner and roast that has been a tradition for all presidential candidates to attend in election years. And it's part of our rich history. It's where Republicans and Democrats can join together and poke fun at one another and show that even though we have political differences, we're all Americans and we all enjoy a good laugh. She chose to avoid that and due to a conflict of scheduling, appeared instead at a Michigan rally. And in the Michigan rally, her main talking point was, Donald Trump could never be allowed to stand behind the presidential seal ever again in this country. Not ever again. Not ever again. It appears that the Democrats have no talking points. The Democrats have no plan for our country. And their only answer to every single question is Donald Trump bad. Meanwhile, all of the political savvy individuals from local government, from the Senate, from the halls of the representatives, all attended this Al Smith Catholic Charities dinner. And Donald Trump did speak. Kamala Harris did produce a video with the help of the Saturday Night Live cast and an attempt at being funny. It was not funny. But she didn't attend this and blew it off. The last presidential wannabe who was running for president who didn't attend this was Walter Mondale, who lost by an epic number. It was one of the biggest losses in political history. And some say it's because he didn't attend this very important dinner, although it probably had to do with his politics. Nonetheless, the last person to skip out on this lost horribly. Let's hope history repeats itself. Donald Trump was quite hilarious in his stand-up routine that was clearly written for him, and he made no bones about it that these jokes were written for him. At some points when the jokes would flop, he would say, "These guys that wrote this for me, I don't know what to think about them." He was quite self-deprecating at times. One of my favorite jokes he told was he said that he was talking about the White Guys for Harris ad that has all of these somewhat macho guys saying that real men don't have a problem voting for a woman. And Donald Trump says, yeah, the White Guys for Harris videos. He said, I'm not too worried about that because even though none of those men are going to vote for me, their wives and their wives' lovers will. That got a pretty solid round of laughter. And when it was his time to really poke fun at himself, he said, they've told me that I'm supposed to come up here and take shots at myself. He said, so I agreed to do it. Here I am. But I came up with nothing. I got nothing. I got nothing. He said, I don't see the logic in taking shots at myself when they've been shooting at me for a good while now. So he joked about the attempt on his life where he caught a bullet to the ear. So this was a big event. She should have been there, Kamala Harris. But this just shows how much she is desperate right now to stay on the campaign trail. But the problem is swing voters want to hear what you're going to do differently. They don't want to hear you say, as she said in a recent interview, that she would change nothing about the past 4 years, that she was involved in the decision-making and running this country, and she saw no problem with her decisions, even though the running of this country resulted in the highest inflation that we have seen in my lifetime. It's the most rapidly inflating prices that I've ever experienced. Even this incredible inflation we experienced in the 1970s is nothing compared to what we're experiencing now. And the American people are not happy about the war in Ukraine, the war in Israel, all the money going to them. They're not happy with the inflation and the higher cost of living in our country, and they're not happy with how our victims of disasters, whether they be in Hawaii, North Carolina, Tennessee, Georgia, and Florida, are not being taken care of. Meanwhile, foreign countries are getting the cream off the top of our taxes. They're getting the lion's share, and our people are being shorted. And but yet she said that she wouldn't change a thing, that she was completely happy with the Biden administration, her role in it, and everything they've done. Meanwhile, the country burns. Now, this is going to lead to potentially some violence. I don't expect the violence to happen before the election. I expect there to be election day violence. Here in Oklahoma, where I'm living now, an Oklahoma City man, a former Afghani national who came here apparently to protect himself because he had worked for the U.S. forces in Afghanistan, and he was given asylum here. And apparently he did work as a guard for the CIA. And a sting operation was able to stop his plot from being unfurled. His intention was to cause mass shooting on election day at polling places. So he intended to attack polling places. That was part of his terror plot that was undone by local law enforcement and the FBI. I guess there still are some people in the FBI who believe in doing the right thing. But he was caught while trying to purchase AK-47s and magazines illegally. And the person that he would eventually try to buy them from was actually an undercover FBI agent. So they were able to arrest him. His plot was well thought out. He'd already moved all of his family out of the United States into other countries so that they wouldn't have to pay for what he was about to do. And he actually sold his home here as well to fund it and to fund their escape. So he had this all planned out, him and a student of a local high school who was apparently his girlfriend's son, his son-in-law or something like that. And at any rate, he had convinced him to help him, and the two of them now are facing a long stretch in prison for their plot to attack our polling places. And I think that this attack that was planned was just a drop in the bucket. I think there are many more plans at work right now that are off the radar, that are not being thwarted, and we could and will, I believe, see violence erupt on election day. Regardless of who wins, the months after the election are going to be tumultuous for sure. If Kamala Harris wins, the Trump supporters will be convinced that the election was once again stolen, and there could be responses to that. There could be civil unrest. There could be guerrilla warfare tactics. There could be a lot of things employed. And I don't think you'll see a big January 6th type protest, because people learned their lesson that peacefully protesting will end you up in Leavenworth, just like any kind of violence might as well. So free speech doesn't exist anymore in America, and January 6th proved that to us, that we are not going to be we're not going to be out there protesting, I don't believe, on January 6th. However, there is a protest brewing from inside the Congress itself. There's talk amongst congressmen that they will refuse, congressmen and congresswomen on the Democratic side might refuse to certify the election. The very thing they accused January 6ers of trying to bring about, from the outside, the Democrat Party intends to do from the inside. There's talk that they will refuse to certify the election based on their interpretation of the 14th Amendment. Even though, I believe it's the 14th Amendment. Could be wrong. Fact check me. Another great Donald Trump joke was, he said this was going to be the first year where jokes would be fact-checked at the charity dinner, the charity roast. But yeah, you can go ahead and fact-check me on that. I think it's the 14th Amendment that was designed to stop people who actively were involved in the rebellion during the Civil War from holding office, every public office except for the presidential office. That was not included in this Insurgency Act, and but they don't believe that that should be the case. They don't believe that the Supreme Court got it right. They've already ruled on this, and many congressmen and women believe that they were wrong, and they are going to not certify the election. And Jamie Rasner, I think, a senator, he might be a congressman, was quoted in an interview as saying that it was their job to stand up to the MAGA mob and not certify Donald Trump and disqualify him, whether the MAGA Republicans like it or not, and then that would put us in a situation on a civil war standing, and all of the Democrats would have to have bodyguards, but that's what they're willing to do to stop Donald Trump. So all of this is building up to a crescendo. I'm nervous as a long-tailed cat in a room full of rocking chairs. Now, I'm safe here behind friendly lines deep in the heart of Oklahoma, but if the Afghani who was attempting to affect the election through violence is any indicator, you're not safe even in the heart of America, even in the heart of MAGA country, deep in the center of the country, that this violence could be present everywhere. Swing states especially might be affected by this. Speaking of swing states, North Carolina is one of the many swing states at play in this election. And a lot of people have a bit of concern as to how this devastation and lack of response by FEMA in North Carolina because of the flooding from Hurricane Helene, how this might affect the ability of North Carolinians to make it to the polls. Can North Carolinians make it to the polls and cast their vote for Donald Trump, or this negatively affect Donald Trump's play in North Carolina to the point where it could tip the election and swing that state away from Donald Trump, even though the polls have him greatly ahead? The polls right now are showing Donald Trump winning in all of the swing states, with the exception of Minnesota, which I believe, because Tampon Tim, well, is the governor of Minnesota and the running mate to Kamala Harris, that Minnesota is not in play right now because of his popularity there. And it could also potentially affect the elections in Wisconsin and Michigan as well because he's a well-known figure. But according to all the polls, we have Donald Trump taking the Sun Belt, which consists of potentially Nevada. It's neck and neck in Nevada. But potentially Nevada, Arizona, Georgia, North Carolina, and that's, I think, the Sun Belt. Florida is also the Sun Belt. Texas is in there, but that's a given for Trump. And only New Mexico is the only state where Kamala is shown to be ahead in the polls, and that's going to remain that way. But Donald Trump is doing great in the Rust Belt states, and I think this has a lot to do with illegal immigration and the illegal aliens that have come to that northern industrial area. We know what's happening in Springfield. We know what's happening in a lot of the cities in the Rust Belt areas, which include Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and what's the other one? Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania. Those are the big three. And it really comes down to the state of Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania is a winner-take-all kind of situation right now, and it's showing Trump to be slightly ahead. Trump is also either tied or slightly ahead in the popular vote. Now, we know from past elections that polling greatly underestimates Donald Trump's reality when it comes to actual votes, that he has never been ahead in the polls until now. He's always been behind in the polls by quite a large margin. There are times, even in the Biden election, that Biden technically won. That's probably going to be the thumbnail for this. AI loves to make fun of me. It's okay. I got a good sense of humor. I know I look goofy doing that. But it appears that lost my train of thought there. I got off on making funny faces. Hey, Jim Carrey made a living out of making funny faces. But nonetheless, it appears to be a really tight race. And Donald Trump has never been ahead in the polls, but now he is ahead. And even in 2020, Biden was supposed to win some of these states by 8, 10, 12%. And he actually only ended up winning by 1% or less in several of them. So the polls have been off 6 to 8%. So if the polls have Donald Trump winning, maybe Donald Trump will win by such a large margin, it will undo any attempts to sway the election through illegal voting, through fake ballots, or any of those tricks, ballot harvesting, any of that. Hopefully that combined effort will not be enough to stop the Donald Trump juggernaut. If Donald Trump wins the election, I expect there to be a backlash from Democrats in the House, in the Senate, which brings me to, on the topic of this violence that might erupt, it seems that the Department of Defense has done something unprecedented. They sent out a directive to all military branches that would authorize them for the first time in American history since the Civil War, to use military force, military weapons, and military personnel to attack American citizens and even kill them, to use deadly force against American citizens in the homeland. This is something that is against a thing called the Posse Comitatus Act. And for those who might say the Posse Comitatus Act is an old document and no longer binding, this was actually amended in 2021. So it's a currently active act that is law in our nation that prohibits the military for using force on its own citizens within the United States. Now, the Posse Comitatus Act also includes a ban on military training of civilian law enforcement or using military weapons in civilian law enforcement. And we know that they have been breaking that rule ever since the war on drugs back in the Reagan-Bush era. That's when they started using military trainers to teach law enforcement military tactics, close quarter battle being taught by people who were Navy SEALs, and intermingling of our law enforcement with military is something they've already done in violation of the Posse Comitatus Act. But this Department of Defense directive authorizing deadly force against Americans is something that has never been done before since the Civil War. And it just tells me that they're gearing up for a Republican backlash if Kamala Harris, the worst candidate in political history, who can't talk her way out of a paper bag, who didn't get there through a democratic process, but was coronated and selected and placed in the position by the Democratic Party without winning a single solitary primary, either this election cycle or the one before that, either, that landed her as the choice for vice president. So she's not been elected. She's been selected. And the American people, over 50% of them, 50+%, are not going to be happy if somehow she manages to win, even though she's behind in the polls. Even though in the past, the polls have been stacked against Donald Trump. If he's ahead in all the polls, showing that he's winning everywhere, and somehow she manages to win, the American people are not going to be happy. And the military is ready to use drones, military force, to use tanks in the street, declare martial law, do whatever is necessary against the American people in violation of the Posse Comitatus Act. I cannot believe that the directive by the Department of Defense has not been challenged already in court. We should sue them immediately. If you're a litigious person or you know a lawyer, you know a civil rights lawyer, they need to sue them over this directive that authorizes them to use deadly force in violation of the Posse Comitatus Act. This is a travesty, and it is clear evidence that the deep state intends to do whatever it takes to suppress our vote, to suppress our voice, and to suppress the American people as they engage in a takeover. If Donald Trump somehow manages to win despite all of the opposition within the beast system, then they might wish that they had not engaged in that directive to the Department of Defense. Because when Donald Trump takes office in January of 2025, and with the evil precedent of this Department of Defense directive authorizing the military, if the left decides to rebel against the election, if they claim, once again, like they did in 2016, claim that Donald Trump stole the election somehow with Russia's help, like Putin wants Trump in there. Putin don't want Trump in there. Putin wants Kamala in there. He can boss her around. He ain't afraid of her. He doesn't know what Donald Trump might do. Donald Trump is a strong man and an outlier and unpredictable. He is extremely unpredictable. So that is not who Putin wants in there. But they might say, if Donald Trump wins, once again, they'll go back to 2016 and resurrect Russiagate and claim that Donald Trump stole the election. And then they might engage in mass riots like they did in 2020 when they burnt American cities down. And this time, Donald Trump won't be bound by the Posse Comitatus Act. If they don't do something, if we don't sue them and stop this, he could abuse his power. They're not thinking very clearly. They're thinking like only if they get in charge what they're going to do about the Trump supporters. That's why the Department of Defense has authorized the U.S. military to come against the American people in an oppressive directive. But they're very short-sighted. What if Donald Trump decides to be everything they're afraid of? He'll have the legal grounds to do it. I bet they'll be against that DOD the DOD directive, if Donald Trump wins. If Donald Trump loses, they will fight tooth and nail to keep that directive in place so they can use the military against Trump supporters. But if Donald Trump wins, they'll work hard to go into lawfare against the Department of Defense and this directive violating the Posse Comitatus Act. I don't want Donald Trump to use the military against the American people, because every time that you step on the Constitution, it doesn't matter what side you're on, every violation of the Constitution, everything that takes us further away from the Founding Fathers is another step towards evil, is another step towards tyranny, is another step towards the dissolvement and destruction of our country. So I don't believe any president should have the authority to use U.S. military against the American people. Let us settle our disputes civilly. If civil war breaks out, let the military decide who they want to back and let that split. And if that's going to happen, let it happen. But this idea that you can destroy your political opponents or prevent them from rioting, prevent them from peaceful protest through military means is oppressive no matter who's in charge. So write your congressman about this, make a YouTube video about it. Let's talk about what we can do to reverse this oppressive directive from the Department of Defense. It is immoral to use military-grade weapons against United States people that are perceived as being the wrong kind of folks. So this is an interesting time to be alive. We've got so much going on with 18 days to go. I'll be lucky if I get another video or two about this before Election Day. But I'm keeping my thumb on the pulse of the American people. It does appear that there's a great groundswell amongst swing voters and average Americans who might have been Democrat in past elections, but this year they don't see political party as much as they see who is going to do a better job running our country. And a candidate who never won a primary, a candidate who finished dead last in 2020 before being gifted the position of vice president. Are they going to back this person who stands behind their broken record of the past 4 years and says they wouldn't change anything even though Americans are suffering in mass? Or are they going to choose the guy who was in charge the last time most of us thought we were in a pretty good position? I know most people were better off in 2016, 2017, 2018 than they are now. That most people had extra money. They could take trips. They could buy toys. People were planning on buying bass boats. Now people are struggling to just buy groceries. And the American people, I believe, are waking up because of the economic ruin that's been brought to us. And hopefully they will choose the candidate who will put this country back on track or die trying. But I don't think it will be easy. I believe that even if we win in a landslide, we will still face opposition amongst the communist cabal members in Congress, in the Defense Department, in the Department of Justice, in the FBI, in the House, in the Senate, and everywhere there is bureaucracy and political corruption. I hope you enjoyed this political soup. Have a bowl of soup on me. The weather's changing around here. It's almost soup weather. That's why we call it political soup. Plus, this thing is about as solid as a soup sandwich. Interesting time to be alive. We'll see you next time. Sage Wanderer coming at you from my cabin down by the creek. Keeping an eye on American politics. Please support the channel through the links below, and we'll see you next time.